talk about some cards.
Dude, let's talk about some cards. Welcome to True Champion Gaming's channel. I'm Terry, this is Caben, and today we're going to continue on our series talking about the new Fractured Crown set of Grand Archive. We're diving into my personal favorite.
Yep.
Some would say the weakest color. I would say that they just they weren't ready for it yet. Now we have so much more to work with, and we're working with our water element today.
Yeah, if there is one video out of the series that you should watch, it should be this one, honestly. I think, well, and Norm is pretty important too. You know, I just watch all of them. But
Yeah.
water is...
Shameless plug.
Water is pretty important. This set got a lot of really strong cards here.
Yeah, I mean, I know myself and you and Isaac, we're in a lot of the Discords. We're always in there talking, and I think that water is probably the most talked about element.
I think so, yeah.
People are excited to see just a new archetype together because you're going to see a lot more. I mean, we're going to talk about it here in just a second. Probably the most exciting card in the set.
Yeah.
Voted by me when we go through our stars, probably the strongest card in the set. So, yeah, I guess you want to just get right into it?
Yeah, so we're going to start off with Korhazi Trapper. We'll do all the regalia at the end. We have a rating system of 1 through 5 stars. It's a little bit of a complicated system because GA is a hard game to rate cards for. If you want to hear us talk about it, you can watch the Norm video where we fully explain it. So this is Korhazi Trapper, a 3-cost ally. On enter, put a preparation counter on your champion. And that is not class bonus, which is pretty nice. And you can tap it, remove a preparation counter from your champion, and target unit's attacks get -3 attack until end of turn. And it's a 1/3 body, which for 3 is not that bad. So I did give this a 3-star.
I originally gave it a 2-star.
Really?
But then I really thought about it a little bit more. And the fact that it gives you a prep counter right off, I think that alone is pretty strong because even at worst, this card is, and I'm going to bring back this saying that I've already been saying a bunch, but on a stick, right? This Korhazi Trapper, it's this damage prevention on a stick. And the fact that it's target units, right? That's huge. It's not just an ally. So if they're going to try to get you with some big sword hit, you know, with a Rending Flame or something like that, boom, we can stop that and really slow them down. And in this format, you're going to see a continuing concept of cards that give assassin prep counters. Because in the first set, and I've talked about it a little bit in normal, but prep counters really were kind of hard to get.
Yeah.
So you never really had that many. You didn't really need to use them all that much. Now we're seeing so many more strong assassin cards, so many more abilities on these cards that, and continued abilities too, because there are a lot of assassin, like new human assassins, that give you these abilities that you can utilize multiple turns as long as you have the prep counters too.
Right.
So I think the ability is actually pretty strong once you think about it.
And it's important to note, neither one of those have class bonuses. We don't see a lot of cards that give and remove a prep counter for an effect. And not a lot of cards, like a lot of the prep counter stuff is usually locked behind a class bonus. So this is a card that you can just run in a Water Merlin deck if you want to, because it still is, like you said, on a stick. It's still that 1/3 body on the board, and it's still slowing down the game. So very, very versatile card, but not like overpowered.
No,
you know?
And I'll match you with that 3-star, because I think that that's a pretty solid rating. So we'll move forward. Fractals, right? We're going to talk about a lot of fractals in blue. So the first one is Deep Sea Fractal. I'm going to read this guy out for you. So it's hindered, which means it enters rested. And we talked about that in Norm a little bit. A new keyword. And on enter, each player puts the top card of their deck into their graveyard. And then it has the reservable text. So basically it gets to sit around and you can utilize it to help cast cards. So for myself, my rating's more towards fractals in general. And I think, so it's not so much this fractal, but I gave it a 4-star.
I gave it a 4 as well. And it is because it's a fractal. So fractals, like we talked about for a long time in the Norm video, really gain their benefit from like kind of just being a card that is always still in mana. Like you're not really giving up the fact that you're giving up a card in hand, but you're getting that bonus effect. And you know, milling a card from each player is a very strong effect, especially in something like a Water Merlin deck, right? Because it's going to be a pretty bad feeling if you're just playing, you know, Sylvie or something. You play this down and you mill your opponent floating memory. Now you've just given them a resource, right? That hurts a lot. But if you're playing something like Merlin where you can just be like, nah, you know, tap your leader and just say bye to that. Now, and Water also has a lot of ways to kind of facilitate the deck, and you can probably set up your own floating memory play too. So
totally. And I just love, so I think that fractals become at their best. They really, really shine when you get into a situation where you could potentially want to cast multiple turns or cards in your hand in one turn, specifically on your opponent's turn.
Yeah.
Where if I had to cast strictly out of my hand, you know, I have to use those resources. Granted, we as we've discussed, these cards would be mana in your hand, but I think when you're using multiple cards and casting multiple things, and also we're going to bring back influence today and talk about it.
It's a very important factor.
And I think that is actually a really big thing, especially as we talk about more of these innervate cards that we'll talk about a little bit today. Right. But overall, 4-star from me, 4-star from you. Yeah. I think we can move to the next one.
So blue does have, or I should say water does have the most fractals. So we already have another one right here. 3-cost Fractal of Intrusion. Another Fantasia. On enter, you may banish a card with floating memory from your graveyard. When you do, look at target opponent's memory and discard a card from it. And then it has that reservable text because it is a fractal. So we have seen cards like this with Frostborn Paladin, for example. You're giving up your own floating memory research because Frostborn Paladin, you banish a card with floating memory to get its additional buff. But that was drawing you a card and getting even a buff counter and stuff. You know, like you're giving up that resource, but it's for a very strong effect. So I did give this a 5-star, and I'm assuming that you did the same.
It was one of the easiest 5-stars I gave out. You guys, you know how excited I was about Gawain's ability, and that is a card that is kind of a little harder to utilize, right? Because you have the class bonus. This is a card that any water deck can utilize and get access to that discard
and
effect.
It's an on-enter effect.
Yes.
You don't have to have the actual ally hit them or anything like that. So yeah, it's a very similar card to Gawain with a lot of its strengths, but it has a lot less cons, you know?
Yes.
So, and when we talked about Gawain, we mentioned, you know, getting that access to information, you know, whatever cards they have down there, now you know what they have, you know? So you might look at your opponent memories, you might look at your opponent's memory and see, oh wow, they have, you know, 4 Phalanx Captains and a Fairy Whispers, and that Fairy Whispers might get them cheaper allies to start like really bringing out those Phalanx Captains. So even though Phalanx is such a strong card, you might just get rid of that Fairy Whispers because you have that knowledge now, and then you know, well, they don't have Valiant Breeze. It's going to take them a while to build up that board of 4 Phalanx Captains. You're going to lose when they do, but now you're going to change your strategy and you're just going to rush them down.
Of course, and that's something that I preach a lot. Not just to newer players, but players in general trying to push their competitive, is information is everything. So cards like this give you a lot of information, even if you don't hit anything that exciting. Still giving you a lot of information. It is an on-enter, like you said, which is really, really nice. And it's also really strong late game when you have floating memory that you're not really utilizing anymore. It's a way to kind of utilize that and get something strong out of it. So that is by far the best fractal in my opinion.
I would say it's, for me, I kind of want to put it in top 3 cards of the set, actually.
It's very strong.
It's that strong. Yeah.
So I'll talk about this next one because it's one I'm really excited about. And this card is called Fracturize. It's a 2-cost action Cleric Mage spell. Target item or weapon becomes a Cleric Fractal Fantasia with reservable and loses all other abilities. This effect lasts indefinitely, and it also has floating memory. And the most important thing about this card that I want to state is it's fast. Which that is insane. I honestly, let me see. I'm gonna look at my notes real quick because I want to say I gave it a 4-star, and honestly, that's probably fair. I think it could potentially flirt even a little higher, especially as this game grows and we get more cards that are like very important from the item and weapons category.
So I gave this a 5-star because the fact that it's fast is so big, right?
Oh, it's insane.
I had to check this card multiple times because I kept like thinking that it was slow because that seems more appropriate almost. But you know, this changes because blue, especially in set 1, but even in set 2, doesn't have like too many ways to interact with Regalia, right? But this is the way for it to react. So now, you know, when they bring out that protective trinket against you, you know, they've changed that, they errated that so that its effect is permanent. So they might just bring it out against you early, right? And hope that it's just going to stick there for the rest of the game. Now it doesn't, right? And so, and I mean, like, let's say that they go into a Regalia that's going to help them with their kill turn. They materialize a Karn Wenin and they're about to Rending Flames you for a ton of damage using that sword. Now you fracturize this because it's fast, and then boom, that just destroys a huge amount of that damage. You know, so like, it brings such a level of interaction. And it does have that downside of giving them a mana rock, giving them one card that's going to consistently basically be another card in their hand that they can't play, but they can use for mana.
But
it gives you a floating memory. So it does mitigate the downside to playing the card, which is just crazy.
Yeah, this card's strong.
Yeah.
Just gives you a lot of room to do some pretty dumb things.
Yeah.
And to protect yourself at fast speed.
Yeah.
The more fast spells that the game gets, the more interaction we'll have. And for me, I feel like when it comes to competitive formats, the more interaction, the better. I love fair play. Obviously, combo strategies are really cool. I mean, they're really strong. I've played plenty of combo decks in my day, but I really love interactive competitive card play. And this is a card that really preaches that to me.
Yeah.
So that being said, sick card, great rating. We're going to move on to the next one, which is Frostbinder Apostle. So this is a 3-cost ally, Cleric Human, with Intercept. And at level 2+ on enter, target rested ally you don't control gets -4 health until end of turn. And this is a 0/2 for 3. So I gave this card a 3. But
really?
After realizing, because I didn't know actually from seeing this, that if you, and this is, I blame One Piece for this one, the One Piece trading card game. I didn't realize that if you were to take something's health to 0, which makes perfect sense, it dies.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, cool. So you can just make something 0.
Right.
Wow.
Because there are some other card games, like you mentioned,
Sure.
that interaction doesn't work that way.
Exactly.
Right?
But this game, this is basically just another kill spell on a stick.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm not going to jump into it. What did you rate this one?
I rated it a 4.
Sure.
I would, if I was rating it just on how strong the card is, I would almost give this a 5, to be honest.
Sure.
Because it is, I mean, just the definition of, slowing your opponent down, clearing off some of their board, and then also giving you some additional protection on top. That is a incredibly important resource in a control deck. So I think it's a very strong card.
Yeah, and I mean, you've seen, Win Lorraine's been an absolute terror to this game since day one. And why is that? Especially the Ally Beats version that plays a bunch of big booty humans, right?
Yeah.
They got that 4 health. This card, by itself, as long as you're level 2, enters and can just one-shot one of those humans.
4 is a very important number in this game.
It is. Yeah. It is. That 4 number is kind of magical. So
because it's just about, because any card that they give a big health is usually 4. We don't see a lot of 5 health allies. So this card almost reads on enter, kill 99% of allies.
Sure.
And it's not technically probably that high, but it basically does read that.
It is
right?
a lot.
So,
yeah. Solid card. I think we're going to see a lot of it.
Yeah.
And now we're going to move into, in my opinion, the best card of the format, the one I'm most excited about, being a control player in other games and just a control enthusiast. This card is called Frostbind. Y'all already know it. Everyone's been talking about it. Yeah. This is a game-changing card. So it's a 2-cost, fast cleric spell reaction that reads, negate target card activation unless its controller pays 2. Banish the card that had its activation negated this way.
Yep.
This card changes Grand Archive.
I mean, it's about a 1.
Yeah.
I think this was
the number 1 card in the set.
Based on how I say, fair. Based on just community engagement alone, this had the best response. People, there was not a single person being oh, this card's not that good. Everyone was just
it was basically either people just absolutely so excited about counter magic coming into the game, or the complete opposite, where they're man, I don't want counter magic. I don't want that in this game. That's gonna just ruin it. But honestly, this kind of card, we've already seen such strong combo synergy in set 1. And I know I've talked about this a lot with you. I've talked a lot with Isaac. I think that it's crazy how we are in this is set 2, right? We are playing decks, for instance, one I bring up a lot is Arcane Rye. That deck has so many cards that were all from set 1 that create this incredible combo deck. It's incredibly resilient. It's incredibly, without counter magic, it is a crazy strong deck.
Yeah.
A card
and not much interaction with it.
Exactly. Right? And it's really hard to interact, especially when they're taking multiple turns with Reckless Conversion and they just keep going. So, a well-timed Frostbind can stop that entire combo, right? Mm-hmm. So, cards like this, I think, really are just so healthy and good. And I know every aggro player that's watching this right now and is man, screw that card, no counter magic. But this really does balance a lot of decks out there, a lot of decks that are trying to be really degen. This has a good way to help fight that.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
Yeah, and I know. Sorry, I kind of took over on that one, but
No,
easy 5-star rating.
You're allowed to talk about your favorite card. From
this is the card
yeah.
when this card got spoiled, I danced around and frolicked like a young schoolgirl. I was so excited. I love seeing counter magic come into this game. I think that it's really needed, and I think it's going to add basically an element to this game that really needed to be here. People are going to have to actually think about what they're doing instead of just, does my combo kill you?
Yep.
Oh no, your combo killed me before I killed you.
Right. So and it's a reactive way to stop those combo decks instead of something like Orb of Choking Fumes right now, where it's like, oh well, you did that to me at the start of my turn, so maybe I'll just try to get a bunch of enlightenment counters this turn, right? But like this is like they just did their full combo and they're trying to kill you, and now you're stopping it.
Exactly.
So it is a very different type of interaction with the decks that we see so far. So,
100%.
But let's go ahead and go on to the next cards. We have a 2-cost Guarded Dissipation, action, warrior skill, reaction. Prevent the next X damage that would be dealt to target unit this turn, where X is the greatest power among sword weapons you control, and if you're level 1 or higher, you draw a card. Not class bonus, and level 1 is pretty easy to get to, so it is fast as well. I feel like we're seeing a lot more cards that protect a unit, and not target ally or target champion. A lot more diversity in those cards. So I did give this a 4.
Wow, interesting. I give it a 2.
I'll let you speak first.
So, okay. It's a really powerful effect.
Yeah.
Hands down. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
We have a lot of damage prevention cards already. I think that this one is just a little bit slim margins, I guess, because in order to really, really get its use, right, you have to have a sword weapon out, right? You have to have a sword weapon that has preferably more than one power.
Yeah, of course.
So because like Sword of Seeking isn't going to do that much for you. But let's say you do have something out that's a little more, or I think 2 is a easy-ish number to have on the board. And then at that point with a 2, honestly, it's not as bad, right? You're stopping 2 damage to target unit, and that can be any unit, which is really nice, which gives you a lot of versatility. And then it lets you cycle. So this was one of those cards I had a hard time with because I had it at 2 and 3, but then when I ended up at 2, it was because I felt as though it was kind of fringe. I wouldn't see this in a lot of decks. It's not just like an auto include in all blue decks.
I mean, you have to be playing a weapon, otherwise the card is useless.
So it has a deck that it makes a lot of sense in. It should kind of just screams it at you, even though it doesn't have class bonus.
Also, I should say it's actually not useless if you're not playing the sword, because it is still a 2-cost filter.
It is.
That is a cheap filter card if you're really needing to get to a specific synergy. But,
I mean, if this card had floating memory, this card would be 4 easily. Like, at a power level out of our scale, 5.
Yeah.
So like getting to cycle and then have that, but obviously it doesn't have that. So it is a nice to cycle, and you're going to be level 1.
So I gave this a 4, not because I think it's just like inherently crazy busted, like its power on its own is just out of the world, right? But I see a lot of instances where, and you've mentioned this before, you're going to draw with a water deck and then pass, right? And you're going to be sitting on a full grip of cards. And when your opponent does something that's going to try to kill off an ally that you have or whatever, now you don't have to play your best defensive card. If they're going to do 4 damage to a 4 health ally, you just play this, you prevent that, and then you draw a card, right?
Sure.
And if you need to play your best defensive card, you can. But I see it more in the strength of like it's going to replace itself, and it's not going to be eating up. Like you have more answers that aren't going to eat up your best. You don't have to counterspell something, right? Right? Like I think there's a lot of strength in it filtering and kind of allowing you to sit on your more strong cards. And I think that's not something that can be ignored.
No, you are definitely right, which is why I had it at 3, and because it was kind of flirting a little bit. And you know what? I think the card does have a lot of potential, and in the future, who knows what Blue Warrior, what that could be. Or, I mean, it doesn't have to be warrior. It could be any weapon, but, it is a warrior spell, so I think Lorraine, weapons or whatever. Who knows what the future holds for that.
Right.
But like you said, at worst, it's a 2-drop cycle, get rid of this, grab a new card.
Right. If you just can't bring a sword out, or if you're playing a deck that doesn't use a sword or something. Right?
And if cycling is your at worst, then you're probably in an okay spot as a power level for a card.
Right.
Yeah. I'm going to read this next one, which is going to be Innervate Knowledge. and this card's friggin' sweet. So
yeah.
So anyway, it's a 4-cost slow mage spell action, and it reads: as an additional cost to activate this card, de-level your champion and recover 5. And de-level is a new keyword. To de-level your champion, return the top card of its lineage to your material deck. So if you were Lorraine level 1, you're going back into your elemental spirit.
Yep.
And then its ability, other than that, is you're going to be drawing 2 cards.
If card games have taught us anything, if a card has draw 2 on it, it is almost always strong. I mean, it really has to say, like, lose the game and then draw 2 cards to be a bad card.
Sure,
you know?
Yeah. And in this game, drawing cards is even more powerful than any other game because that counts as your mana, your energy, whatever you want, right?
Yep.
So the more cards you have in hand, the faster you ramp.
Yep.
So a card like this, that on its own, so something I've noticed in this game is that a lot of things in this game require another card to really get you incremental advantage. For instance, Cremation Ritual with a floating memory ally. Like, that's kind of something that, like, that combo is what everybody's trying to do, right?
Yeah.
And it takes 2 cards.
Which is also meaning that it's a higher cost, too.
For sure.
Yeah, because now you're doing 7 cards for that combo.
Exactly.
Right?
So with that, right, so you have to do all of this stuff in order to get full usage to where it feels like you're actually getting a plus.
Yeah.
Because you get to draw 2, and then you get that floating memory.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like a 2.5, not really a 3. This card, on its own, sure, you de-level. I think in a lot of situations you could argue that de-leveling is actually a good
almost
thing.
a buff, right? Because if you do have that floating memory in your grave and you are going from a 0 to a 1, I think every single level 1 champion has an on-enter effect. So you're going to be redoing that effect, which with like Rai, for example, is almost drawing another card, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, that is insane.
Yeah.
So this card on its own, when you play it, not only are you, you have to de-level, take that how you will. If that's a plus and minus, whatever.
Yeah.
You get to recover 5, which, I mean, if anybody's ever played against Luxem Xander, they know how strong recovering is.
Yeah.
So that 5 recover is not something to like look over. 5's a lot of damage.
It is.
And then on top of that, this card on its own, you play and you get to draw 2.
Yep.
So 1 card to plus cards in your hand.
Yep.
It's an actual ramp card.
It's crazy. So each color has one of these, right? We have fire, wind, and water all got one of these. I think that this one is the best. Because the big reason is, like we talked about, the whole 0 to 1 situation. You're now only having to go 1 card from your memory, or hopefully a floating memory at worst, to get back to the stage that you were, and then you're also getting that on-enter effect. So you kind of really do want to play these at that level 1 stage, because going from level 3 down to level 2, that is a that is a big nerf, especially if you're playing something like Rise Stormseer, which, like, you know, you're not getting a buff once you bring it out again, right?
Sure.
Like, so, and that's taking up a lot of resources. So these cards, I think, find their strength in playing them earlier, and drawing 2 cards is good at any point of the game, right?
100%.
But when we get into fire, it's dealing damage to allies, which, like, you may want to do early in the game, but it also might not be giving you any benefit.
Sure.
You might activate the fire innervate and not really get any positive outside of just the recovery or something.
Totally.
So this is just such a consistent card.
Yes, and I do want to mention, too, that if you do de-level all the way down, you die.
Yes. Do not play this when you have a level 1 champion on board.
Yeah. You do. You know, if you're playing Trisket, if you're a competitive Trisket player, you don't want to play this.
Yes, because Trisket banishes your champion stack and becomes the only card on there. So if you play this with Trisket, like you said, you
just kill yourself.
You made a little bit of an oopsie there.
Yeah. So anyway, super exciting card. I'll let you take the next one.
So we have Ocean's Blessing, which is a 2-cost Fantasia Tamer spell. Ally link. So it's going to enter the field and it gets linked to a target ally. So if that link is broken, you sacrifice this object, which means if you link it to an ally and that ally gets Zephyred or bounced, or if that ally breaks that link, goes away in any way, this card will now go to the drop. So it's going to have a +1 health and get taunt with a class bonus for Tamer of having floating memory. So I gave this card a 4. That doesn't seem right. Where is this? You go ahead and rate it.
I gave it a 4.
I did give it a 4. Okay, I was just letting you.
First. Yeah, I gave it a 4. If there's anything I know, I've played Magic the Gathering for a really long time. I know how strong enchantments are.
Yeah.
And enchant creature cards, and that's exactly what this is.
Yeah.
Taunt is a new mechanic, and I've played, Hearthstone Taunt's insane, and it's kind of similar in this game, right? I think that Taunt in a Tamer deck is where it really, really shines because it forces them. I mean, we talked about Bedivere, that's her name, and how strong that card is, right? Because then they have to kill it. Obviously, it has a big bonus effect. If you go wide, everything gets bigger. But with this card particularly, it gives it an extra health, so it gives it a little extra buff to it, and then on top of that, we're giving it Taunt, right?
Yeah.
And if they do kill that guy or bounce it with Zephyr or something along that lines and you lose this also has the floating memory.
You didn't really waste the card in the first place, which is really good. Yeah. And so I did give it a 4, and the very important reason for that is because it is a water card with Tamer class bonus. If it was something like a green card with, or a wind card with assassin bonus, it would probably be a 2 for me or something, because the synergies with this are really, really nice because we have Giant Tortoise. We have Blue Slime, which is a card that I've tried to rack my brains on how to make it a good card in set 1, and you just couldn't. But now you can actually give it Taunt and that extra health and force your opponent to start actually triggering Blue Slime's effect, which is just crazy.
Yeah, it's a strong card for sure.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see more of these Fantasias, Tamer spells, and all the other classes as well, but just more enchant creature stuff. Back to another Fractal, Protective Fractal. Fantasia Cleric Fractal for 4. It has Reservable, and then it has Tap, prevent the next 1 damage that will be dealt to target champion this turn.
Yep.
So I rated this, again, this is more for the Fractal, a 4-star.
Yeah. 4.
Sure. I mean, the ability is okay.
It's interesting because being that you have to tap it, you're using this to prevent damage or you're using it for mana. So you really have to make a choice there. And I think that you might get in situations where you kind of like waste this often because you're not going to want to use it for mana, because what if you need the damage prevention, but then your opponent like just doesn't do damage to you that turn or something, you know? And then it's like, oh, well, shoot, now I kind of wasted this, right? So, but it's a Fractal. So.
Sure, it's a Fractal. And then also, it has this tap effect, and we don't have this yet, but as somebody who has seen tap untap decks built in other games and being able to abuse effects that can be used multiple times, I could see a world with, maybe not right now because we don't have the support for it, but if you find a way in the future to, I don't know, maybe there's an enchantment that goes on top of a Fractal, or you can put it on anything, and then if you do X, it untaps it, right, or awakens it. And so if you could find a way to do that with this, and then every turn you're sitting there and you could easily get 3, even 2.
Which you can, because you can play 4 of this. This isn't a regalia item. So you could, in theory, over the length of a game, play down 4 of these.
Sure.
And then now, preventing 4 damage per turn, that's a much bigger wall.
That's a lot. And I also think it's very important that if you read it, it's just damage in general.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh, attack damage or spell damage. So
it is only preventing it from champion, which it would be a little too busted if it was.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But we're going to move right on to a card that kind of goes with all these fractals that we've been talking about, called Refracting Missile. This card's really cool. It is a 3-cost fast action mage spell with deal damage to target unit equal to the number of fractals you control +1. And then on top of that, it has floating memory. Yeah. So for me, I gave this card, so my notes, I wrote in all caps with like 30 exclamation marks, Prismatic Fractal Control. But I gave it a 2-star.
Oh, wow. That is not the rating I was expecting.
I love this card. I know you know this card is like, boom, right in my wheelhouse, but I think it's very fringe. I think that I'm not going to be seeing a ton of decks running Refracting Missile. I don't think we might not even see right away a deck that really gets its full usage of this, but I can see this card being extremely strong, being an absolute win con. But what did you give this card?
So I gave it a 4 because I don't think you need this to deal 4 or 5 damage. You know what I mean? I think, cards that just have floating memory on it, especially not locked behind a class bonus, are just really strong. I mean, you think about how much like Water has Tide Diviner. It has a fractal that mills the top of your deck and everything like that, right? The more cards that you can put into your deck that already work in your strategy that just have floating memory on it really builds for a consistent deck. So I think like you really have to value that part of it. And Blue has the most fractals, right? So like I think having 2 to 3 out in a game isn't unreasonable,
crazy, yeah.
right? And then now if you're talking about a spell that's doing 3 and then floating memory, like that does become a little bit better, right?
Yeah.
So I see what you're saying.
It takes a very specific deck for it to really shine.
Yeah.
Because I don't think you play this card if you play no fractals in your deck.
For sure.
And I don't know how, obviously it's too soon to tell how popular fractals will be.
Yeah.
But if fractals do, and I think this is why I gave it a 2, is because if fractals end up being super, super relevant in the meta from a competitive standpoint, because all of these ratings are from a competitive standpoint, right? We're not talking about limited. We're not talking about, a casual standpoint.
Right.
So with all that said, I think that there is a lot of potential. And like you said, floating memory alone on a card, especially one, because I believe it's fast, right? That was a fast.
Yeah.
So we have talked about how strong it is to have fast, because at worst, the card is fractals +1. Yeah. So it could be.
It is fractals. So it couldn't be a 0.
Can it? I thought it was fractals +1. My bad.
+1. Never mind.
Oh,
You're right.
It is 1. Yeah. Okay, so okay, you know what? This card could definitely find a 3-star in my book then.
Yeah.
Because being able to just have something that you can cast at fast speed, and then here's my floating memory.
1, right?
Yeah.
I mean, when you're playing down your Gawain and I use this card against you, I'm gonna look at you and I'm gonna say this card's a 4, by the way, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So I think that this card actually is a little bit better than I initially thought. And honestly, I don't think I remember it saying +1.
Yeah, I didn't remember that either, and I still gave it a 4.
Yeah,
but it definitely was a 4 with the +1.
Yeah.
Because, Fire has Ignite the Soul and stuff. Like, if you're having Gawain in hand, and you're playing against the Fire Eye, you're going to be scared of it dying, right? And this is Blue's answer to that, easier, So we're going to move on to our next one, which is Riptide Slash. So this is a attack warrior sword, class bonus on attack glimpse 2, and on kill you may put the top card of your deck into your graveyard, and it has 2 attack. So I did give this a 3.
I also gave it a 3.
Yeah, I think it's, you can almost read it like the card itself has floating memory, because if you're glimpsing 2 and then milling yourself 1 essentially, which isn't mandatory, you may, you can essentially kind of try to set up a floating memory and drop, but it's a really inconsistent floating memory because it has to actually kill something.
Sure.
You do have to actually see that glimpse and see a floating memory and stuff, and if you're milling this card itself, it doesn't have that floating memory, which is why I think refracting is refracting missiles is a 4.
Sure.
Again, just FYI.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just a little inconsistent for my taste.
Sure. I really like the fact that this can basically set up some floating memory. That's pretty much what I got at. It's a 2 for 2. That's kind of pretty much the standard.
Right.
It's pretty close.
I would almost want to just run Savage Slash over this. Because it does have that floating memory guaranteed in
and you
it.
Just get it.
And like it could matter one day that you have X amount of water cards in your deck and stuff like that, but as of the moment it's just not consistent enough to really consider using.
Yeah, and I think that for 2 damage, like let's say we don't kill something.
Yeah.
Like let's say instead we're like planning on going face.
Yeah. Or
even if we do kill something, it is you may, so you don't have to. So if we do glimpse and we miss a floating memory and it's like 2 cards, we can fix our hand a little bit, which obviously is strong. It's a strong effect, but I think that this is definitely not a 4 of in all blue decks. Yeah. This is not a crazy powerful card. But
I would say anytime I have this in my list, I'd probably be swapping out for Savage Slash.
Yeah,
I really just think that that's such a hard card to compete with for an effect like this.
Sure. I think the only world would be a deck where you're trying to reveal a bunch of blue cards.
Yeah, and I mean, glimpsing is giving you that effect of, like you said, fixing your hand and stuff. So yeah.
So it's fine. It's a decent enough card. The next one, and the last spell that's not from Regalia, it's something from our material from a blue card, is going to be the Song of Frost. Now, this is a fast action tamer skill melody, which I'm excited to see so many melodies and harmonies. So the class bonus is you may banish a card with floating memory from your graveyard rather than pay this card's reserve cost. That's pretty strong in its own right there. So if you do have that class, that's great. And now this part's even crazier. If a unit is attacking, end the combat phase.
Yep.
That is a strong card. For me, I gave it a 4-star.
I gave it a 3.
Just because I don't know if this will be a deck. I don't know how strong Water Melody Tamer is.
Yeah.
I I haven't dabbled that hard into that deck building.
I think, giving up a card to end a combat phase is a big ask, but it is a melody, and I think that's where the strength lays, because I think we do see a lot more interaction or combo synergy for that. And it is, ending a combat phase is very beneficial because it's really the only way to interact with a card like Hasty Messenger right now, where your opponent plays Hasty Messenger, you don't have a chance to kill it on enter, so then they can just immediately go into their attack phase. And unless you are ending the combat phase, that is the only way to stop that trigger and having them discard and draw a card and everything. So it is a strong effect. I think giving up a whole card is hard for that. I think we just kind of have to see how strong melodies are.
Sure. So I think that it's when it really becomes busted, because we've talked a little bit about effects like hand traps and things like that, because that's what this card is in a melody deck, right? It really is. So if I have one card in hand, they're like, oh, they can't do anything. Oh, well, I can actually with this. I think that this card is actually a really strong, because you don't have to have the class bonus, right? You can cast this for 2. I think this card actually, in a lot of slower blue decks, could be a super strong way to deal with some Fire Lorraine decks or things like that, where you can just end that combat when they try to go for their kill turn. That if they're trying to, something I didn't really think about actually that just hit me is in Water Tamer. If let's say we're going aggressive Water Tamer, when they try to sweep our board and we just go, no.
Yeah.
End combat.
It's a very good point.
It is strong. Yeah. So I guess when I read it initially, I didn't think about it in that way, but that's super strong. So yeah, it's a good card. I think there's a lot of play to it, and I think it's going to see some play. It's a card you will see.
Yeah, that's fair. So we have our Regalia items now. So this is a super interesting one. 1 cost, Erudite Azure Blade. So it's a Regalia weapon, warrior sword. Class bonus on enter, you may banish any amount of cards with floating memory from your graveyard. For each card banished this way, put a refinement counter on this card. And it gets +2 attack for each refinement counter on it. So essentially, it's a 1/2. So essentially, as many floating memory cards that you banish, it's going to get +2 attack. Maybe refinement counters come into play later. Sure. I definitely think that could be a thing that we see. We have Weaponsmith that puts durability cards on cards, or durability counters on cards. We could see Swordsmith or something that puts refinement counters on cards, right? So that is important to note that right now this just reads +2 attack for each floating memory you banish, but it could get stronger later too. So I did give this card a 3, however.
I gave it a 4.
Really?
Yeah. I think that, I guess if you go by our ratings, if you watch our normal video, you'll know that 3 makes sense.
Yeah.
But as the power level of this card on its own, I definitely think that this card has a lot of late game potential. And we'll see how popular, Raccoon Merlin is and things like that, because obviously in worlds like that, this card gets a lot worse.
Yeah.
But I always think of, as a control player, my least favorite thing in the game is mill. So I think of this, if someone were to mill me a bunch of cards, or I get to a super late point in my game where I have all these floating memories, I've got a couple cards left in my material deck that maybe I need 1, or maybe I don't need any.
Yeah.
And now I'm in a situation, probably 1 because this card would be in there. And all of a sudden I have 6 floating memory, and we get to this point where I go, okay, play this, banish 6, add 12 attack to it. And so now I'm hitting for 13, and that's a 2-turn clock. I
think there's just consistency problems with it because of the other cards we've seen, because there's a lot of ways to stop attacks, even champion attacks now, and floating memory is already a hard thing to suit up to actually make this a good synergy, because if you're playing a normal level 3 champion deck, ideally you're going to want to use 6 floating memory for all those level ups, right? So then it's how many are you really going to have afterwards for a card like this? I think the obvious synergy is Mordred with this card, right? I think we have to touch on that, because Mordred does increase the floating memory cards in your graveyard basically, and you're also only getting to level 2 and stuff. So this is a really good synergy with Mordred. But I just think it's incredibly easy to play around and stop, essentially. I think it's a really cool combo that's just very stoppable.
Sure. And I think, like you said, it really is just going to kind of depend where this game goes, how slow it gets, how defensive people play.
Yeah.
Because right now there's not a lot of decks playing defensive. But when you see and have access to so many more defensive cards, I think we're going to see a lot more, especially out of sideboards, things like that. I mean, if you get your opponent on game 1 with Azure Blade, you better believe they're bringing in something to deal with it.
Yeah, those raccoons are coming.
Something's happening to deal with it. So anyway, I'm going to move us over to the next one, which is one that I'm super excited about. And this is Cloak of Stillwater. It is a Regalia item, assassin accessory for 1. Class bonus on enter, draw a card. And then it has tap, banish a card with floating memory from your graveyard, prevent the next 3 damage that would be dealt to your champion this turn. And that is not banish this Regalia. That is a effect that can be utilized, as many times as you can tap it. Yeah. So for me, I gave this card a 4.
Yep, I think it's a super solid 4. I think a lot of people would agree on that.
Yeah.
As we've talked about, Regalia is kind of the standard for it is if it costs 1, it should be drawing you a card and giving you some sort of effect. This definitely does that, right? Yep. It's a very strong additional effect onto the draw card, and the fact that it's an instant speed banish a floating memory to gain an effect. Because now if your opponent is trying to raccoons you or use Merlin to get rid of your floating memory, sure, if you use this, it's going away and you're not going to use it anyways, but now you're getting that defensive ability.
Yep.
So the fact that it's like that kind of, I'm going to do it for myself instead, and now I get this bonus, that's strong.
Yeah, and Merlin's not going to get their bonus out of getting rid of your floating memory, so this does counter her, which is pretty cool. I think the biggest reason why I flirted with putting a 3 on this was just because I think that the on-enter draw card is very important to making this card very good, and you have to be an assassin.
That is fair. Because I mean, we're gonna see a lot of water decks, and not all of them are gonna be assassins. Exactly. So that is a fair
100%
rating there.
I'll let you take over this next one.
Sure. So we have Spirit of Serene Water. With this is one of the 3 champions. Every single element got this: fire, water, wind. On enter, glimpse 6, draw 6 cards. Lineage release, recover 6 by banishing this card from your champion stack, essentially, from your champion's inner lineage. So same health as the other spirits, but obviously with a big difference of having glimpse 6 and draw 6, which we kind of touched on. Or no, this is the first one that we're talking about.
This is the first one.
So I gave this a 4 because this could be, I mean, it probably is a 5 because of like our scale and being meta changing and stuff like that. But I mean, this is basically our way to mulligan in the game, which is really interesting because as soon as I saw this card before, I was like, I wonder if they're going to add in mulligans eventually. Now, definitely not, right? Like, that would just make this card a 1 almost, 100%, right? So,
yeah, for me, I gave it a 4-star. I did have a 5-star on there because of what you said. So if anybody has played competitive cards, they know how strong a mulligan is, right? I mean, we have a Regalia item that basically lets us get kind of a mulligan right now.
It's like half a mulligan at any point of the game,
But you have to get that out on a whole turn and utilize it. This is basically a Hearthstone mulligan where you get to see your cards and then you go, I don't like these ones. And you get rid of them and you get 3 new ones, right?
But so 1 less.
Yes, but it is 1 less.
Strong cost.
And I really, really want to bring up because I love these new spirits. I think that giving us access to a glimpse 6 right off the bat is super, super strong. But I cannot hide my fear of playing first and winning the roll, playing this, glimpsing 6, to then have my opponent play a standard spirit, draw 7 + 1, and then +1 on their turn.
And do a GCR. And like this was our whole point in the UR video, the Divine Relic video that we did. Like that, you can really start to, especially if you're playing that relic and your opponent's doing ring, you really start to see a 3-card difference just immediately, which is insane. And I'm really glad that you brought that point up because I think that these cards' strength actually exists in the sideboard because you can't forget that you can sideboard champions. So when you're going, second, now you can actually be like, okay, well, I'm going to curate my hand and I'm still getting that +1 right, from that draw. So I think this could be a really interesting thing where you see a normal spirit in game 1 and then sideboard into it if you're going second.
Yeah, which is super, super cool.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
It's a very cool concept. And then we do have to talk about the last part, which is it has the lineage break, right? Yeah. Which is important, the lineage release. And you recover 6 when you do that. And what that is you activate this ability by banishing this card from your champion's inner lineage. So basically, you give up your champion's ability to cast spells of that element to recover 6. How good will that be? We're not really sure. I'm not like maybe if you find yourself in. We talked a little bit about Prismatic Sanctuary. That's a card that's really, really cool, and I think has a lot of fun potential. Maybe one day could see a really cool deck built around it. That deck would really, really benefit from something like this, or a Trisket play.
Right, absolutely.
Because you can use all the elements. It doesn't matter.
You can still use your advanced elements. So once you're at that level 3, usually those advanced elements are the cards that you're going to be wanting to play anyway. So it might not feel that bad later in the game. And I did mention the whole sideboard thing. The reason that I thought that was so strong actually too is not only you get that +1 and like you can choose to do it second, but even if you're going first in game 2, you might want to bring this in because that glimpse becomes a lot stronger once you know what deck you're playing against, and you may have brought sideboard cards in 100%. Against them. So that is a really strong thing to do there.
Super strong.
We talked about that card a lot though. Let's go ahead and go on to our second to last card, Wand of Frost, which is a 1-cost Regalia Cleric Mage Wand. Class bonus on enter, draw a card. You banish Wand of Frost and target units attacks get -3 until end of turn. I gave this a 3. I'll let you rate.
I gave it a 3 too.
Yeah, so its effect is strong, but we don't really have, too many cards that are really swinging multiple times per turn and stuff. There are a few, but this is a card that definitely I think gets stronger over time as we see that kind of strategy get alive, because then you're really nerfing that strategy. But right now, this kind of just reads, prevent free damage. So it's strong, but not overpowered.
Yeah, no. I think honestly, it's kind of just like a cycle for a Mage Cleric that has a cycle's not the right word because it is drawing, but at what cost? I mean, you paid 1 to do it.
You're paying a floating memory or something from your memory.
So it is kind of a cycle.
Yeah. It actually is really similar to the first card that we looked at in the video, Korhazi Trapper. It's negging 3 something for a whole turn, and it's like kind of giving you, Korhazi is at least a body on the board. This filters, it's a little similar.
I will say, like, if this card kind of followed that Cloak of Stillwater, where you could just tap this to have an effect like that.
Oh, for sure.
Oh my gosh! Think about how strong this card is, right?
Yeah. Well, then it's just Cloak of Stillwater that you're not having to give up a floating memory for. So right. Yeah, of course it's strong.
But what I mean is, like, but you have to banish it, right? So like. It's
if
a strong
it was somehow
effect.
Not a one-time use.
Exactly. Yeah. If there was a way to use it multiple times, I think that card would be much stronger. But as it is, it's fine.
So I read off the last card, but I'm going to read off this card too because 1-cost Wildheart Lyre. I am super excited for this. Regalia item, Tamer Instrument, reservable. So it's a fractal that exists in the material deck, which is very strong. Class bonus, whenever you wrestle at Wildheart Lyre to pay for the reserve cost of a Harmony or Melody activation, put a buff counter on on a animal or beast. Whoa,
slow down there, Kevin.
Put a buff counter. I do know the effect, I just misread. Put a buff counter on a animal or beast ally you control. 5. I would be shocked if you didn't give this a 5. Yeah, okay. This is, I said so many times in DOA, Discordia is going to become an insane card. Like, you look at this card, one day it will be a feared card. In DOA, unplayable. I don't think it's ever seen any sort of top tables, right? But now we're starting to get to that buildup of like, oh, now I have Wildheart Lyre out and I have Discordia. Now I'm playing my melody that doesn't even have to have an insane effect. Like, we talked about that one Norn melody that was like, it's kind of good, but then once you're getting those bonuses from all these other cards, now it becomes an insane card. Like, you can bring this out right away. It's a water typing. It's not Terra. So you can start to get these buffs super early in the game. And just very excited for it.
I think that the fact that this is not a Terra card is insane. Yeah. The fact that this just gets to hit.
Because it's also ramp.
Yeah.
It's you give up a floating memory and now you have a permanent card. It's just, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's insane.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. This card is absolutely insane.
Oops, dropped my phone, my bad.
Absolutely insane. You're going to see it. It's going to get played. Be prepared to just see animals and beasts on the board all buffed up because they got this Lyre standing there that is just continuously helping them play more. And then,
imagine buffing up a blue slime a couple of turns, then you link it with the taunt, and now how do you deal with that, right? Like, especially in blue that you have all this counterplay with. It's crazy.
This card's crazy. So
good card to end the video on for sure.
Definitely.
Please feel free to comment below any things that we might have missed, something that you learned from our videos, because that is, we're trying to give our discussions and just help everyone come into Fractured Crown swinging stronger.
Yeah, I want to know, honestly, if you guys are team Frostbind or team no Frostbind. So I think that's something that I'd like to see in the comments as well. So anyway, really appreciate having you guys here, and we'll catch you on the next one. Take it easy.